What up, everyone? Hello, Ego here. Today, I wanted to talk about what waveshaping is, and I wanted to present that in the context of Ableton's Saturator and also the MWaveshaper from Melda Productions. I get a lot of questions about like what exactly this box in the middle of Saturator is, and what waveshaping is, and exactly how to use waveshaping. And I'm just going to go over a few of my favorite ways that I use waveshaping here and show you. So, first of all, what a waveshaper is a waveshaper shapes the waveform. I know that might seem really obvious and really on the nose, but it is a device that allows you to literally map the waveform to a certain curvature. And that curvature is represented by this box right here. And this box is called the transfer curve. And what this transfer curve is showing you is half of a single cycle of the waveform. And that's easier shown than it is talked about. So I'm just going to demonstrate this for you. First of all, I just want to say, Ableton's Saturator has a Waveshaper setting right here, but technically all of these saturation presets are forms of waveshaping because they all deform the waveform and shape it a little bit to get the saturation style effect. So technically this whole thing is a waveshaper. And I'm just going to use the analog clip preset to show you what this transfer curve is actually demonstrating. Up here I have a clean sine wave I just recorded from Operator, really basic sine wave. And what I'm going to do is just give this little drive, and I'm going to record it into this channel down here. Okay, so this is what Saturator has done. It's kind of squared the waveform a little bit. It's given it some drive. Now, what we are actually seeing in this transfer curve is a region of the waveform from about right there. So check out that highlighted part and check out the shape in the transfer curve, and they look about the same, right? Because that's what we're seeing. That's what this is demonstrating. This is saying, hey, I'm going to do this to your waveform. So this is very useful, right? As we go through all these different presets and try and figure out exactly how this is going to affect our waveform, then we can look at this little visualization here and see that this is going to square it off but keep it a little bit round on the edges here. If we go to the soft sine, it's going to be a little bit more aggressive than the analog clip. You can see how the curve here is a bit steeper in the middle part. That means it's going to drive it a little bit harder, but we're still going to have this nice round edge. And whereas the analog clip, this was pretty straight in here, this is going to give you a little bit of like sine wave curvature in between. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look, you can see it's got a bit of like a S shape to it right here. This looks pretty similar, and we're not going to see much of that S, but, different flavor. Medium curve is just harder, right? It's still have a rounded edge, so it's not that hard, like harsh digital clipping yet, but it's more aggressive. We're getting more upper end harmonics up here. Hard curve, same deal. It's pretty squared off at this point, right? And again, take a look at this. This right here looks like this. An incredibly useful visualization. Sinoid fold. This was where things get a little bit weird. So what sinoid fold's going to do is that. It essentially adds a bit of like an extra sine waveform in there. This can be really, really useful for subs, by the way. All right. If you're going to like make a sub out of a sine wave, I highly recommend you add a little bit of this sinoid fold in there, because what this S is showing me, this like kind of weird wobbly squared off thing is showing me, is that there is a third harmonic present. And if we look in our spectrum down here, we see that we have my low C0, right? If you look in the bottom left of the spectrum, you can see the note. Low C0, and the next harmonic we get, is G1, which is the fifth of C. It's 1 octave and 1/5 higher. This is the third harmonic, and third harmonics are very, very nice to include in your subs because they provide upper end definition for your subwoofer. Like let's say you show your track to someone on a computer speaker or on a small Bluetooth speaker or on your phone, and this low fundamental frequency does not pop through, you at least will have this right here to be like, okay, provide the hint of a sub, and your brain will actually be able to kind of fill in the missing sub. So it's nice to have this in here. So I highly recommend add a little sinoid fold saturation and create some like interesting, there we go. So if we give it a little more drive, okay, not that much drive. Let's do like 2 decibels here. There we go. This is what I usually like my subs to look like. I usually want this squared off shape with a little bit of that dip in the top. So Saturator is great for that, or just adding the third harmonic in, but that's a topic for another day. Next, we get to digital clip. As you can see from the transfer curve, it's going to be just a hard clipped waveform. There we go. If you notice when it gets to the top here, it'll just like immediately clips it off. Let's drive it harder so you can see. There we go. Hard digital clip. And then finally, we get to the Waveshaper down here. Now, I'm just going to talk quickly about what the parameters of this Waveshaper are. The whole point of this video is to basically explain what this transfer curve is, because once you understand what the transfer curve does, then you entirely understand what any Waveshaper does. But let's just quickly talk what these parameters are. So drives at 100%. That means when you change any of these other 5 parameters, it's going to do something. Right now, it's not really having much of an effect. We just get that sine wave, right? We're not really hearing anything. If I turn curve up, all of a sudden we start adding in upper order harmonics. There we go, right? We've got this little curvature shape being applied to the waveform, and now we're adding in, looks like the second harmonic, which is an octave above. So this is going to add an octave to your waveform, and also adding in just a little bit of the third octave there. The depth, oh, this is nice. I like to combine depth and period. So check out what depth does. All right, depth is just giving us that third harmonic again, and also the 5th harmonic, I believe. So harmonics 1, 3, and 5. But if you use this period and turn this up, this changes the rate of this depth curvature. So you get these really nice harmonics. Let's turn this up a little more. Ooh. Look at that. Let's turn the depth down a little bit. So we're still getting that nice sub fundamental. We can add the curve in a little bit, right? Now we're getting a much more interesting looking waveform with some upper end noise as well. So using all of these in little bits is very helpful. What damp basically will flatten a little bit of the waveform. It says down here near the grid's origin, right? So it's like basically like a noise gate. It's easier to hear what this does than it is to see, but if I turn damp up, you can see it adds a little bit of like flattening near the 0 crossing point, but that doesn't really transfer, because you can see that flattening is happening here and here. So it's not really on the 0 crossing point. It's basically just where the origin of the signal is, wherever this determines the starting point of the signal. You can hear it most when you start adding in things like curve and period and depth. Let's turn damp down. Right, so damp just kind of preserves some of these lower end harmonics, right? These lower mid harmonics. And then we have linear, all right? This will either drive it harder. So it's kind of pushing, it's going to kind of push the waveform more, or it'll drive it not quite as hard. So push it down here. There we go. And we're creating a more flat waveform without that nice fundamental sub in there. So that's a basic overview of what the Waveshaper in Ableton's Saturator does. I want to talk about MWaveshaper from Melda, though, because Melda has a free Waveshaper that is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love it. Use it all the time. MWaveshaper. You can tell how often and how useful I find something by the number of little tags it has. This is it's a processor, it is distortion. I can also even here put in dynamics, it's also EQ, and it's very useful. I use it for everything. All right, now let's get rid of this. When you open up MWaveshaper, you're presented with, once again, a transfer curve, right? Just like we talked about. Wait, a little sip of coffee, 1 second. So What this transfer curve shows you is from the zero crossing point up to the maximum crossing point. So, or the maximum point of the signal. So basically, it's showing you what happens from this point right here, which is the zero crossing, all the way up to here. Okay? Now, this is going to show you it comes in this volume and out at this volume. And what I mean by that is if I hold a point down, right? Let's just put a point in here like that. So hovering over this point, we can see that any signal that comes in at negative 11.5 decibels is going to go out at negative 11.5 decibels. No change, right? So let's just find an arbitrary point on here. Let's say this right here, this little point is negative 11.5 decibels. I don't know if it is or not, but it might be. What this is saying is as the audio enters the Waveshaper, I'm going to turn it up to 100% dry wet. As the audio enters the Waveshaper, it passes through unchanged. Now, if I were to boost this part of the signal, then it would increase this. It would pull this up higher. If I were to reduce this part of the signal, it would pull this down a little bit lower. This is easier to show with audio near the zero crossing point. So I'm going to double click this to erase it. Now, remember how I said that what this is showing me here is the range from here to here, okay? This basically is having a mirrored image effect on everything underneath it from there to there. So everything I do here will be reflected in the lower negative part of the waveform. If I want, I can click this asymmetric button, and now you see this 0% has moved to the middle, right? So now the 0% reflects my middle crossing point right here. And all of this is the negative waveform, and all of this is the positive waveform, and I can mess with them independently. I'm not going to mess with that for the sake of these demonstrations. And when I do dive in and start recording this, you're going to have an easier idea seeing what I'm talking about here. Now, what I'm going to do is just make a little tiny spike down near the bottom. Now, what this is going to do is create a zigzag of the audio near the zero crossing point, right? Because silence right here is the zero crossing point. Let's record that. Check it out. There's our zigzag right there. So as I was saying before, this right here is represented by this right here. Okay? And what happens up here is reflected oppositely down beneath it in this area. So we get a little zigzag like that. Now, I will show the asymmetric one just so we clear a little confusion about that. What I'm going to do is put a zigzag just in the top end like that and re-record it. Okay, so now you can see you've got like little bat ears on either side of it, right? We don't have anything in the lower part of the waveform because we haven't added anything to that low part. What this is saying right here, it's saying that if you look here, any part of the waveform, actually, let me get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, turn it back to this, do a little zigzag for you again, like so, and re-record. Okay, now, you can see actually this line going through the waveform here, right? Kind of hard because it's loud, but like as I let it go, you can see this line pulled on through. That's basically showing you the passage of the waveform through it, through the Waveshaper. And it's saying when it gets to this section here, if the audio comes in at negative 47 decibels, output it at negative 7.34 decibels, okay? Now, that's a huge boost, right? And that's what we're seeing here. Any audio that's very, very, very quiet down here, boost it up and make it much louder. And you can see it's making it almost as loud as the loudest part of the waveform. If I were to take this all the way up to 0, then this part down here near the zero crossing point has been boosted to be as loud as the top of the waveform here. So all this quiet stuff has been brought out. This is really great because we normally can't get at that quiet part of the waveform, right? This isn't a part of the waveform that is normally inaccessible to us because think about like compressors, right? Compressors interact with the loudest parts of the waveform. So if you use a compressor, when the audio passes the threshold, the part of the audio you're dealing with is this right here, the loudest part of it, right? You're not dealing with the quieter parts down here. So you can really get in here and morph your wave shape any which way you want. Like if I wanted to create a similar, you know how I told you at the beginning of the video that the Saturator is actually just like a Waveshaper? Well, let me show you, all right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a similar curve to that what the Saturator does. I'm going to square off the waveform, so everything above negative 8.87 decibels is going to go out at negative 8.87 decibels. So if we check that, I mean, it's not exact, but let's make it exact as we can get, something like that. Okay. So right here, if it comes in at negative 2.81, it goes out at negative 9 decibels. So all of this is basically flattened off. What we've done here is create like a hard digital clip, and I'm going to record it and show you. Actually, what I'm going to do is boost this and turn this down. Okay. There we go. There's my hard digital clip. Now, if I want to smooth that out and create more of like a soft clipping algorithm, I can actually grab these handles and smooth it out. And now I've created more of like an analog soft clip. There we go. Rounded those edges out. Let's make it even softer. Nice and gentle. Isn't that like a beautiful saturated sound? So you can do this nice analog style saturation with MWaveshaper. Very, very useful to be able to get at the waveform like this. And also, for instance, let's just say, let me go ahead and undo all of this. Put this back to normal, okay? Oops, don't play. What I want to do now is I want to actually just boost the whole waveform. So what I'm going to do is drag the middle up like this. And what I've done is essentially what I was doing before. I've kept the volume level, the maximum level is 0. And I've said that anything that's down here, like let's follow this down. If it comes in at negative 36 decibels, which we can see down here, it's going to go out at about negative 18 decibels. If it comes in at, I don't know, what is this, negative 50 or whatever, it comes out at negative 30. If it comes in at negative 18, it goes out at negative 6. Right? If we just follow this grid right here, we've boosted everything but the loudest bit. If it comes in at 0, it's still going out at 0. And that is going to have this effect on the wave shape. It's a big, fat sine wave now, right? It's got more saturation. It's got more harmonics. Look at that. But it's still a really fat sine wave. I love to do this on my drums. Okay, let me just make a quick drum loop here and put it into this for you. Let's just put the drums over in this channel here. Drum loop. I'm going to try and find drum lop. Drum loop. Drum loop up. I'm going to pause this video because I can't type. Okay, so I found myself a lovely drum loop here. This is actually one that I made myself, and I'm making it available to my Patreons, my Patreon subscribers at some point. Which means it might be a good idea for me to mention real quick, if you like this tutorial and all the other ones that I'm doing on this YouTube channel, there are a lot more tutorials like this where I go very, very in-depth about a lot of various topics on my Patreon. I'm also giving away sample packs that I make with my Eurorack synth and other hardware analog gear. Like I said, big, long tutorial videos. I offer track review. I offer custom sample packs, so if you want me to make a sample pack that is only for you based on your specifications, I'll go ahead and do that for you, and I'm also offering private music production lessons. So I hope to see you over there. If you can't do the Patreon right now, then just subscribe to the video here on my YouTube. That's a huge help, honestly. Can't even begin to describe what a big help it is as I grow this channel. All right, so let's take a look at this drum loop, and I am going to, ooh, my Waveshaper got tiny. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Come back, Waveshaper. In fact, let's just get rid of this. Bring it back again. There we go. And I'm going to return this back down to 0%, like that. So now, this is going to have no effect. Just got that swanky, swanky rhythm going. But the moment I start to boost it, listen to how much fatter this gets. It really just brings out and saturates that waveform in a super nice way. If I were to record this, you can see the difference in the... right? So it's made all of this louder. It's saturated the kick a little bit, giving it some oomph. You can see right here, it's kind of rounded off this part of the kick and just really fattened it up and brought tails out. Very, very nice effect. I like to use Waveshaper instead of compressors a lot of the time on my kicks and my other drums that I want to fatten up a little bit. I'll just slap an MWaveshaper on, add the curve up a little bit like that. And in the same way that you can do this to increase the volume, you can also decrease the volume of a sound, right? If I just pull this down, it'll make it a little more anemic. It's like basically anything that is down here, if it comes in at -12, it's actually going to go out at negative, what, 30, -40, something like that. But it's keeping the really loud parts in there, right? So the kick is the loudest part, and that's remaining not quite unchanged, but not very changed, right? Because the kick is as loud as this curvature part right here. So it's really coming in at, like, you know, if it's coming in at, what is this, -3 decibels, it's going to go out at -6. That's not as big of a change as coming in at -12 and going out at like -40, right? So it's going to maintain the higher end of it, but you can see that as the waveform declines here and gets quieter, it kind of pulls it back in this, like, you know, swoopy curve that we've got going on here. So it adds that swoopy curviness to all of the waveform. And then I can go in here and make weird distortions if I want. I don't often use MWaveshaper this way, but ooh, crunch. Look at that crunchiness, right? And we can see that on the more sine wavy parts of it, it's just added in that zigzagginess to it and create a lot more crunch. So that's all for this video. It was a long one this time, 20 minutes or so. Hope that you found this useful. I hope that you, you know, were able to understand Waveshapers a little bit better. Melda Waveshaper is a free one. Definitely recommend you go and nab that. And I will see you in the next video.